Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, training camp is right around the corner. Training camp is set to kick off in just over a week, and the NFL season is not far behind, with the Lions set to play their first preseason game in the middle of August, and of course, have their season opener on September the 11th. The NFL season is not very far away, and before we get into training camp, before we get into the preseason hype, before we get into the regular season of the NFL and the Detroit Lions season, I wanted to do a video. I wanted to do an overall kind of umbrella video talking about the Detroit Lions in their entirety, going over their record from last year, going over their free agency, their draft, their coaching staff, their talent, their projected starters, their schedule for next year, their floor versus ceiling, etc., etc. And today, that is exactly what we are going to be doing. Right before the NFL season gets underway, before training camp happens, before preseason happens, I wanted to do one large video about everything you need to know about the Detroit Lions, starting from last season in January until today and now. So with that being said, and with that being the case, the Detroit Lions were a very interesting team a season ago. Record-wise, you wouldn't expect them to be a very competitive team or a very competitive roster. However, the Detroit Lions were one of the scrappier teams in the NFL. And although the record may not indicate it, right, they finished with a 13-1 record. They finished with a record where they ended up with the second overall pick in the NFL draft. They ended up with, a top 5 pick. They ended up with a bottom 5 record. They did not end the season the way that they wanted to when the season first began. However, the Detroit Lions were far from the second worst team in football a season ago, right? Looking at their overall record, 3-13-1, they took an incredibly long time to actually find their footing, I guess, in the Dan Campbell era, right? They started 0-10, didn't win their first game until week 11 versus the Minnesota Vikings. But once they won that first game and kind of found out how to win as a football team, they were fairly successful on the latter half of the NFL season. Right, 3-13-1 record overall. However, the last 5 games in which Jared Goff was the starting quarterback, the Lions went 3-2 with wins versus the playoff wild card contender Minnesota Vikings, the number 1 seeded Green Bay Packers, as well as a Cardinals team that had huge playoff aspirations, and if they had beaten the Lions, would have clinched a playoff berth and likely would have changed the landscape of the NFC playoff picture. So the Lions finished their last 5 games 3-2 versus 3 legitimate playoff contenders. And when you want to look at their losses, in week 3, they took a 2-point loss to the Baltimore Ravens, and it took a NFL record 66-yard field goal for the Baltimore Ravens to narrowly escape Detroit with that win. They lost to Minnesota by 2 points in week 4, where they traveled to Minnesota and they were up by 1 with just 17 seconds remaining. And, Kirk Cousins turned into Tom Brady for a game, right? They had a 2-point loss to Chicago on a walk-off field goal. They had a 3-point loss to Cleveland with Tim Boyle as the quarterback under center. And they had a lot of other losses that weren't super far, right? The 49ers loss was only by 8 points, which was 1 possession. They had a couple other games where it was 5, 7, 8 points, but a majority of their games came down to a really close finish, came down to a 1 possession loss. And a lot of those games could come down to, okay, 1 play here and there makes a complete difference, right? In week 1 versus the 49ers, yeah, they lost by 8, but Jared Goff in the first quarter missed a wide open touchdown to Amon-Ra St. Brown, and the kicker missed at least 1, if not 2 field goals in that game. I can't remember exactly what happened, but I remember he missed the field goal on the opening drive after the Lions forced a turnover on defense in opponent territory, right? That's a 10-point swing right there. That's a victory for the Detroit Lions, right? A blown missed call in Baltimore allowed them to kick the 66-yard field goal, right? Minnesota, you just got to be a little bit more aggressive on defense. That's a 2-point swing right there. If the Lions defense can hold out for 17 seconds, that's another win. Same thing with Chicago. Same thing with Cleveland and Tim Boyle. If he doesn't throw 2 interceptions and even just keeps the football without scoring any points on those drives, right? Maybe the defense has better possession. Maybe the Browns don't drive as far. Those plays make a huge difference. And the Detroit Lions, like I said, despite having that 3-13-1 record, they finished the season fairly strong. And even in a lot of their losses, they were an extremely competitive football team. Now, I do want to point out before we get into the free agency and what they did after this, that the Detroit Lions went into the season with a below average roster on paper, right? They went into the season week 1 with Jared Goff as a starting quarterback. Jared Goff, I'd say, is about 20th in the NFL, somewhere in the high 20s as far as quarterbacking talent right now, right? They went in with DeAndre Swift, who's a very good young player, with TJ Hawkinson, who's a very good young player, and a very good offensive line. But their skill positions as far as wide receiver weren't very good, right? It was Tyrell Williams as the wide receiver 1. It was Quintez Cephas as the wide receiver 2. It was Khalif Raymond or Amon-Ra St. Brown splitting time as wide receiver 3, right? Jamal Williams, a guy that I think is a very good player, but a career running back 2, was taking more snaps than DeAndre Swift because DeAndre Swift was injured to begin the season, right? Taylor Decker didn't play at the start of the season. There was just a lot of inconsistencies, and there was just a lot of things to go wrong with the Detroit Lions roster. They weren't super talented. They didn't have a great receiving core. He didn't have the greatest quarterback. And even though Jared Goff, I don't think, is a poor quarterback, he did have some confidence issues going into 2022 that needed to be addressed by Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions. Now, I think looking at this right here, obviously seeing rookies played 6,172 snaps, being the most rookie snaps played by any NFL team last season by a wide margin, kind of speaks to why the Detroit Lions may have had the record that they had, right? They were relying on not only Penei Sewell and Levi Onwuzurike and Aleem McNeil, their top 3 picks, but they were relying on guys like 7th-round pick Jermar Jefferson to get their running game going at times during the season. They were relying on undrafted rookie free agents Jerry Jacobs and A.J. Parker to man the secondary and be the leaders of an extremely young cornerback and safety room. They were relying on guys like Jesse Lemonier, an undrafted free agent at linebacker, who ended up coming up with 2.5 sacks in some big moments for the Detroit Lions. But nonetheless, they were relying on a ton of rookie talent. They were relying on UDFAs. They were relying on young players to step up and make plays in the NFL against NFL veterans, against the greatest quarterback in the NFL, against, the back-to-back MVP, against, the best defenses in the NFL. They were relying on young talent, and 16 of their players ended the season on injured reserve, which was the 4th most players in the NFL, I believe only behind New York, Baltimore, and I believe New Orleans was the 3rd team. Now, getting on to the actual free agency market, the Lions were not super aggressive when it came to free agency, right? DJ Chark was kind of that one guy that the Lions went hard after. They only signed 2 offensive free agents. They only had an 8-man free agency class in total. So the Lions weren't super aggressive in free agency, kind of repeating that from a season ago, right? You sign 1-year contracts, you sign cheap deals, you sign team-friendly deals, you sign prove-it deals, and if that player proves it, then you re-sign him to a longer-term deal, i.e., Charles Harris from a season ago. Same thing with Khalif Raymond, or even to a lesser extent, Josh Reynolds, right? Those players signed super cheap 1-year contracts for very little money, but they performed in 2021. They helped the team find the success that they did have a season ago, and they got rewarded with longer term and more financially stable contracts. Now, the Lions took a very similar approach this offseason, but they did have a little bit of a splashier move as DJ Chark, the wide receiver from Jacksonville, was available on the wide receiver market. And in a wide receiver market where the wide receiver from the Arizona Cardinals, whose name is escaping me, Christian Kirk, in a world where Christian Kirk is making $82 million, and you have Devontae Adams and Cooper Kupp signing absolutely massive contracts, making upwards of $20 million a year. DJ Chark on a 1-year, $10 million contract is a very, very good team-friendly deal for the Detroit Lions. The wide receiver market is one of the most overpriced positions in the NFL because it's a premium position, right? You see Jamar Chase make that immediate impact on the Bengals. You see Jamar Jefferson. You see Justin Jefferson make that immediate impact on the Minnesota Vikings, right? Sometimes an elite wide receiver can put you over the top. And a lot of the times, an elite wide receiver and a good quarterback can take you to the playoffs almost single-handedly. Now, DJ Chark is a former Pro Bowl wide receiver, a former 1,000-yard guy in the 2019 NFL season, who unfortunately missed a large majority of last year with an ACL injury. DJ Chark is a good player, right? I believe he stands at 6'2", has a pretty good catch radius, has very long arms, but where he really excels is being that deep threat. He is a big, fast wide receiver who can create separation down the field, and that is the exact kind of wide receiver that the Detroit Lions were looking for when they wanted to go get that guy, right? Last year, it was Tyrell Williams, the 6'4" wide receiver that ran a low 4.4 40-yard dash. They wanted somebody big and fast that can create separation. Unfortunately, Tyrell Williams didn't work out, but now they're taking swing number 2 at DJ Chark. And I think DJ Chark is a better option. I think that as long as he can stay healthy, he runs better routes, he has very good hands, has very good body control in the air. He is what you want in a number 1 wide receiver, right? And until Jamal Williams gets healthy, the product from Alabama who was taken in the first round, who we will talk about later, until Jamison Williams gets 100% healthy, DJ Chark will be the number 1 target. He will be the number 1 X wide receiver on the boundary, and getting that type of player, getting a potential Pro Bowl wide receiver and a wide receiver 1 for $10 million in a wide receiver market that exploded this season is an extremely team-friendly deal, but also just an extremely good deal overall for both the Detroit Lions and for DJ Chark. Now, getting onto the defense, the Lions did spend a little bit more money on the defensive side of the ball. Deshaun Elliott, the safety from Baltimore, was kind of a late offseason addition, right? He was kind of in that second to third wave of free agency, and they signed him for extremely, extremely cheap. He is also coming off a really bad injury, but he, like DJ Chark, are both on the field playing right now. They're running routes, they're covering, they're breaking, they're exploding off of, cuts and stuff like that. They are fine as of right now. They're running, and they seem to be 100% healed. But Deshaun Elliott, a starting safety for the Baltimore Ravens, who is a very, very good member of that Ravens secondary for a long time in Baltimore for many years. Mike Hughes, a starting cornerback on the Kansas City Chiefs a season ago, former first-round pick, somebody that played very well as a cornerback 1 a season ago, likely won't play cornerback 1 this year in Detroit, right, with Amani Oruwariye and Jeff Okudah, and even the emergence of Jerry Jacobs as a starting boundary corner last year out of undrafted free agency. But Mike Hughes is a very good depth player. Our secondary saw a ton of injuries a season ago, and if Mike Hughes comes in as the 4th or even the 5th cornerback in this roster as a boundary guy, likely the odds are that injury will catch up with the Detroit Lions again, and the Detroit Lions will be forced to play somebody. And if they have to, Mike Hughes proved last year that he can be a solid starting cornerback for the Detroit Lions. And then, of course, Jarrad Davis, the former first-round pick of the Detroit Lions, selected in the Jim Caldwell era, barely survived in the Matt Patricia era, and was exiled during the beginning of the Dan Campbell era, was officially brought back to the Detroit Lions on a 1-year, $1.1 million contract. Now, Jarrad Davis is a very interesting player for Detroit fans. He is somebody that I believe didn't really get a fair shot in Detroit. I think he is somebody that, was a first-round pick, suffered a head injury very early in his NFL career, but as a rookie played very well, had near 100 tackles, had a forced fumble or two, had some sacks, had an interception. He was a very good rookie linebacker, and going into year two, there were some high expectations. In year two, Jarrad Davis got better. Jarrad Davis had 6 sacks. He was a legitimate pass rushing threat. He was somebody that, had 100+ tackles. He was a good linebacker in year one of the Matt Patricia experience. But Matt Patricia, for whatever reason, looked at that player, looked at his third-year linebacker coming off a 100-tackle season, coming off a 6-sack season, and said, that's not a player that I want to build around. That's not a guy that I want to put on the football field. So he signed guys like Christian Jones and Jamie Collins, and he signed lesser athletic, less productive linebackers to take the role that Jarrad Davis was playing at a fairly high level. Now, is Jarrad Davis a bust in the NFL? At this point, I would have to say yes. I think Jarrad Davis has failed to live up to the expectations of a first-round pick from the University of Florida, but I don't think that is entirely on the shoulders of Jarrad Davis. Jarrad Davis did his best in Detroit. Jarrad Davis forced some turnovers. He got a lot of tackles. He got some pressures as a blitzing linebacker. He played the exact role that Matt Patricia asked him to play, and he was by far the most efficient linebacker on the Detroit Lions. It just so happened that the head coach at the time didn't want to play his best players on the defensive side of the ball. It was not just Jarrad Davis. He had the same problem with Glover Quinn. He had the same problem with Quandre Diggs. They were all very good football players. Jarrad Davis is not the only player to have suffered from the Matt Patricia era, kind of in a similar vein to why I think Jeff Okudah will have a very good year this season. But Jarrad Davis is coming back on a 1-year prove-it deal, and I think he might be this year's Christian Harris or Charles Harris. I do think this year he could be that guy, that former first-round pick, never really found success, is now on technically his third team in the NFL after signing a brand new contract with the Detroit Lions. He could be that guy that bounces back, could be that guy that earns a starting spot in camp, could be that guy that even as a rotational linebacker could be in certain packages, could blitz in certain ways, could be, just that utility tool in the linebacking core. And the Lions linebacking core is one that Jarrad Davis has the opportunity to take a spot, right? It's not a superstar studded core. It's not a core that has a Bobby Wagner or a Luke Kuechly or a Fred Warner or a Darius Leonard, right? Our linebacking core right now, and we'll get into the projected starters later, our linebacker core right now is a 6th-round rookie, is a 4th-round rookie from last year, is Alex Anzalone, it's, Chris Board from Baltimore. It's a bunch of role players, and it's not a bunch of superstars. So Jarrad Davis certainly has an opportunity to go out and make some splash plays in preseason, make some splashy plays in camp, and truly earn another starting linebacker role in the NFL. And this time under Kelvin Shepard, under Aaron Glenn, in a defense that will know how to use him and will be willing to use the talents that Jarrad Davis does bring to the Detroit Lions. I think this could be one of the sneaky good deals of the 2022 offseason. Now, getting on to the 2022 draft class, this is a class that, of course, has 8 members. This is a class that I think is a very good one, right? Of course, you start off with the number 2 overall pick in Aiden Hutchinson. Aiden Hutchinson is somebody that just, he's the best player in the class, to put it quite frankly. Somebody that was 2nd in the Heisman voting, coming off 14 sacks this season, coming off, leading Michigan to their first Big Ten title, leading Michigan to, the college football playoff. He was arguably the best player in college football a season ago, and inarguably the best defensive player in college football a season ago. He was a wrecking ball, he was a force, and he should slide in pretty seamlessly to the Detroit Lions and make a huge impact immediately on the defensive line. The Lions have put a ton of emphasis on putting assets into the defensive line in Detroit, right? Last year, they signed Romeo Okwara to a 3-year contract. They drafted Levi Onwuzurike in the 2nd round, and they drafted Aleem McNeil with back-to-back picks in the 3rd round. They took, offensive line. They took defensive line. Their big thing was to build the trenches, and that didn't stop this season, right? Day 1, was an edge rusher in Aiden Hutchinson. Pick 46, a high pick in the second round, was another edge rusher, or, I'd say Josh Paschal is more of a rotational guy, right? Can play interior, can play exterior. He is somebody that, put up really good statistics at Kentucky. You go to day 3, James Houston, technically a linebacker, played a majority of his snaps as a pass rusher at Jackson State a season ago, coming away with 17 sacks and 16 and a half tackles for loss a season ago in his senior season at Jackson State. So the defensive line and the front seven was obviously a huge point of emphasis for the Detroit Lions, and they started off the draft by getting maybe the best player in the entire NFL draft, and then they backed that up and continued their draft by trading up with their 32nd overall pick, moving up to pick 12 in a very, very good deal by Brad Holmes, might I add, to take maybe the best offensive player in the entirety of the NFL draft. Jamison Williams is a player that tore his ACL, unfortunately. You can maybe sense a theme here with the Detroit Lions and the players that they acquired this offseason, but Jamison Williams tore his ACL in the national championship game and has yet to return to the Detroit Lions practice field. He has been at the facility, he has been training, he has been catching footballs, he has been running, not cutting, but he has been, running in straight lines, or, running a very non-sharp route, I guess is the right term for it, right? Just kind of walking through routes, catching footballs, getting his hands right, getting, just some more reps in catching the football, but he is yet to actually return to 7-on-7s or competitive team periods. But he was maybe the best wide receiver in college football a season ago, and if not, he was certainly the most explosive. Jamison Williams was projected to run a 4.2 low 4.2 40-yard dash, and he himself said that he expected to break the 40-yard dash record. And when you watch him at Alabama, that may very well have been true. He was the most explosive player in college football a season ago. He was a huge reason as to why Alabama had the kind of high-flying offense that they had, and he's just all around a very good fit for Detroit, right? He's the exact kind of wide receiver that the Lions wanted. Is a little bit similar to DJ Chark in the way that he's 6'2", is extremely fast, is a very, very good route runner. He's not just a speed guy that'll take the top off of a defense. He is a guy that will run every single route in the route tree and run it very well. He creates immense separation from NFL cornerbacks, or from SEC cornerbacks, and will do the same versus NFL quarterbacks. And he is just somebody that will get open, will put up production, and he is somebody that I truly believe, and I know that, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase are not the normal in the NFL, but I do think that Jamison Williams will have the opportunity to have that kind of season, right? He may not play until week 6. He may not play until the latter half of the season, but when Jamison Williams gets on the field, I think he will open up his NFL career in a similar way to the two LSU players. I do think he is explosive enough. He runs the routes. He has the hands. He has the explosiveness. Jamison Williams will be a star in the NFL as long as he can stay healthy. And I think he will be the next breakout wide receiver in the NFL. I think he will be the next Justin Jefferson. I think he will be the next Jamar Chase. And next year, we're going to be talking about how to find the next Jamison Williams. Now, Josh Paschal was the third pick in the NFL draft, pick 46 overall in the second round. And a lot of people were concerned about this pick because you have Romeo Okwara, you have Aiden Hutchinson, you have Charles Harris coming off a 7.5 sack season. So why would you spend a top 50 pick on a fourth edge rusher that won't see the field as often as maybe other players you could have taken within the top 50? Well, Josh Paschal can play a large majority of the roles on the defensive line. He can play interior, he can play on the edge, he can play any role that you want him to do. And I do believe that the Lions, although they will rotate a lot of players around, and Josh Paschal will probably see time as an edge rusher, I think you're going to see him more on the interior, taking over a role for Michael Brockers. Michael Brockers was a huge piece of the Lions defensive line a season ago, but the Lions need to replace him. He's 31 years old. He's the only player on the Lions roster over the age of 30, and he is somebody that just isn't going to be here long term, right? And Josh Paschal, a player that was getting first round buzz before the NFL draft, a player that has a ton of versatility across the defensive line, a 3-year captain at the University of Kentucky, and somebody that was very productive on the edge for the Kentucky Wildcats, is a good pickup for the Detroit Lions. Was it the best pick for the Lions at the time? That can be argued. Could you have maximized this pick with maybe a more valuable position or a bigger position of need? Again, there's an argument to be made. But Josh Paschal, I would argue, was maybe the best player on the board at the time, is somebody that fits the mantra of what the Detroit Lions want to do. And if they use him properly, can turn into one of the best picks from this class in its entirety. Now, looking at Kirby Joseph was the 97th pick in the 3rd round for the Detroit Lions. He's a rangy, ball-hawking free safety from the University of Illinois, and this was maybe my favorite pick of the NFL draft. It's not my favorite because Aiden Hutchinson being, just the story, the hometown kid, is a great pickup. Jamison Williams, I think, is absolutely my favorite pick just based off the potential he has at wide receiver. But if you're talking about a value pickup, I think Kirby Joseph might be the best value in this entire class. Kirby Joseph is somebody that the Lions were looking at 46. He is a rangy free safety, came away with 5 interceptions a season ago, and just didn't get talked about because of the defense and the school that he played for, right? Illinois is not a blue blood program. It's not a winning program. It's not a even bowl eligible program at this point. But Kirby Joseph was a star on the Illinois defense. He came away with 5 interceptions, came away with a ton of takeovers a season ago. We did the math when Kirby Joseph was drafted, and I believe close to 50% of the total turnovers Illinois forced a season ago was by number 25, Kirby Joseph. He is long, he is rangy, he has really, really good ball skills. I would argue that he has the best ball skills in this entire class of NFL safeties at this point. I would say Kirby Joseph, if you want to compare his ball skills, his ball tracking ability, and his high pointing ability to any other cornerback or safety in this draft, I think you'd have a hard time coming up with somebody that's better at finding the football in the air than Kirby Joseph. Now, Kirby Joseph will likely start as a special teams player or a role player. I don't think he's going to start over either Deshaun Elliott or Tracy Walker this season, but I think he will rotate. I think he will have a very select role in the Detroit Lions defense and in the NFL to start. And then, right, if you feel confident in him, you will let Deshaun Elliott walk next season and you start Kirby Joseph. Or if somebody gets hurt, Kirby Joseph slides in as that safety 3. I think it's good depth. It's a good position. It's a very good value for the player. And overall, it was a great pick for the Lions. Now, the Lions opened day 3, didn't have a round 4 pick, but had a round 5 pick and selected to go back to the offensive side of the ball. They selected James Mitchell, the tight end from Virginia Tech. Now, James Mitchell, if you want to guess, did have an injury in the 2021 season, and just like his teammates, did tear his ACL last season. But he is going to return very soon to the Detroit Lions. I believe he is on a timetable right now that he could return at any point this time during the NFL training camp process. And he is a very good receiving tight end. He's not the greatest blocker, but he's a good athlete. He is somebody that is extremely good with contested catches. Has, again, very strong hands and catches the football very well through traffic. He has good hands. He high points the football well. He's athletic. He's big. He's fast. He will be a very good receiving threat for the Lions. Should be a really, really good red zone weapon for Jared Goff this season. And I think James Mitchell, although he might not see the most playing time and although he might not see a ton of targets, should see some pretty good production down in the red zone and should be a good red zone threat for the Detroit Lions. Now, the Lions picked 11 spots later and got, in my opinion, the absolute steal of the draft. A lot of people think that, Nakobe Dean in the 3rd round was an absolute steal. Malcolm Rodriguez in the 6th at 188 might even be a better value than that. Malcolm Rodriguez was a captain at Oklahoma State University a season ago, led the Cowboys to a top 10 finish and a Fiesta Bowl victory in the 2021 college football season. He's a little bit undersized at only 5'10", but he is a great leader. He is a great football mind. He is a playmaker. He is a hard hitter. He is good in coverage. He is the total package at linebacker. And if he stood at 6'1" or 6'2", like some of the other linebackers in this class, he would have very easily been a top 50 pick. But with him being undersized, he unfortunately did fall in the NFL draft. And to the Detroit Lions' gain, he fell to the 6th round. Now, the Lions doubled up at linebacker in the 6th round by taking James Houston, the linebacker from Jackson State, who, again, as I said, playing at an FBS school, put up 17 sacks and 16 and a half tackles for loss a season ago. And you could argue, yeah, it's because he played lesser competition, but 17 sacks and 16 tackles for loss is 17 sacks and 16 and a half tackles for loss. I mean, production is production, and James Houston was productive. He transferred away from Florida in his junior or senior season and played his last couple years of college football at Jackson State, went to go play with Deion Sanders, went to go play with, a really good football team to win a lot of games and put up a lot of production. And they did that as a football team. James Houston was maybe the best player in that conference and maybe the best player in Division II football. He was the Aiden Hutchinson of that part of college football. And I know that, it's not necessarily the high FCS, right? It's not necessarily the SEC or the Big Ten or even the ACC or Pac-12, but his production can't go unnoticed. His production can't go without being talked about, without at least being acknowledged, because he was extremely productive and he can play a lot of roles. He can play off ball. He can play edge rusher. He can play as a pass rusher, as a blitzer. He's very good at a large majority of roles that he would be asked to do in the NFL. And although I don't think he'll necessarily start, he should be an extremely, extremely productive special teams contributor on day one. And if you can develop this guy, if the Lions coaching staff can develop James Houston, a big, fast, extremely productive, and extremely aggressive linebacker into what they want, they could end up with one of the best linebackers in this class. I think he has an extremely high ceiling. He's athletic enough. He's productive enough. He's aggressive enough. If the Lions can just kind of teach him a couple of things in the NFL and kind of fine tune some of the things he's already good at, they could be walking away with a long-term starter at James Houston. And then Chase Lucas was kind of a flyer pick, right? Round 7 pick, 237 in the NFL draft, couple picks from Mr. Irrelevant. He's a good cornerback. He adds, some experience. He adds some depth. He adds a good quality cornerback, but he's not going to be a starter long-term. He might not even make the active roster. I don't think it was a wasted pick by any means, but I think, again, kind of like maybe the James Mitchell pick or kind of like maybe, a couple other picks in this class, you could have maybe maximized the position or maximized the value at 237, but by no means did they walk away with a poor football player. Now, giving out grades, Aiden Hutchinson, I'll give an A. Jamison Williams, I'll give an A+. Josh Pascal, I give a solid B. Again, good player, but maybe not maximizing the effectiveness of pick 46. Kirby Joseph, I give an A-. James Mitchell, I give a B, because again, I just think you could have maybe gotten a better player in the 5th round. Malcolm Rodriguez is an A. James Houston is a B. And Chase Lucas, I give a C+. No failing grades, no bad picks in this class, but of course, you're not going to ace every single pick. Now, overall, I do think that the Detroit Lions, maybe they didn't win the draft, but they were certainly up there. If not a number 1 class, they were a top 5 class. And I would even argue and go as far as to say they were a top 3 class in the entirety of the NFL. Now, getting on to some quality UDFAs, the Detroit Lions had, I believe, a 9 to 10 player UDFA class. And although a lot of the players are still very early in the process, right, a lot of players haven't necessarily had the opportunity to break out, 2 players in particular have done very, very well. Undrafted free agent Khalil Pimpleton, the wide receiver from Central Michigan, the hometown kid, is performing extremely well in rookie minicamp and is doing very well in all of the competitive team drills that the Detroit Lions have been running throughout the early stages of the preseason. He's been creating separation. He consistently is winning one-on-one routes, and I think he will make the active roster as the last wide receiver on the depth chart. And then Demetrius Taylor is a player from App State, put up extreme production at the Sun Belt Conference and put up a lot of production at App State throughout his 4 seasons. He was an undrafted free agent because, again, kind of like Malcolm Rodriguez, he is a little bit undersized for interior defensive line at only 6'1", but he plays with a high motor, plays with extreme leverage, is very strong, and again, was very, very productive at the college football world and was extremely productive as a member of the Appalachian State Mountaineers. I think both of these players will make the roster. I think with the retirement of John Pennicini, that opens up a spot for Demetrius Taylor. And I think with the addition of wide receiver Khalil Pimpleton, he will push Khalif Raymond for that last wide receiver spot. And I do think that he will end up taking that spot. I think he's just outperforming Khalif Raymond in camp. He is kind of the hot hand, the rookie wide receiver. And if not the active roster, Khalil Pimpleton will 100% be making the practice squad roster by the time preseason comes around. But expect Khalil Pimpleton to be not only a training camp standout, but a preseason star for the second team Detroit Lions. Now getting on to the coaching staff, Dan Campbell is, of course, going into year 2 as the Detroit Lions head coach. He is somebody that is going into technically year 3 as a head coach, as he did kind of interim head coach for the Miami Dolphins a few seasons ago, and then, of course, had his first official season with the Detroit Lions. He is somebody that, is good at building culture. He is a very good head coach, in my opinion. Is he a top 10 coach? No. Is he a top 20 coach? Not yet. But if you're talking about what he was brought there to do, he was brought there to build culture. He was brought there to bring in talent. He was brought to Detroit to win football games and to establish a long-term culture in Detroit. And that's what he's doing. He's bringing in culture, guys. He's bringing in culture fits. He's turning around the idea and the mindset around the Detroit Lions. And that is kind of what he was brought in to do, right? Dan Campbell is somebody that was brought in to build a culture. He was brought in to build up the roster. He wasn't brought in to call plays. He wasn't brought in to, be the offensive mastermind or the defensive mastermind. He was brought in to run the building, and he was brought in to build the culture. And as far as doing those things, I think he's done a very good job so far going into year 2. Now, Ben Johnson is the new OC going into year 1 as he was being promoted from the passing game coordinator from a season ago. He is somebody that kind of helped Jared Goff find his stride late in the season, kind of, took over a little bit of play calling duties, took over a little bit of game planning duties late in the season, and really impressed the coaching staff in Detroit. He's going into year 1. A lot of the players, just from reports and news articles, seem to really, really like him. They seem to have a lot of respect, and they seem to be very excited about this whole process that is going down. Ben Johnson is kind of starting to be praised as maybe that next young offensive mind in the NFL. And if he can, even be above average, if he can even get Jared Goff to play as a top 15 quarterback, if he can get, the most out of a young wide receiving group, if he can get a career year out of TJ Hawkinson or DeAndre Swift, you might be talking about Ben Johnson as a potential head coach in a year or 2. And then Aaron Glenn, of course, being the defensive coordinator returning to Detroit, going back for year 2, had some head coaching buzz in the offseason, but decided to return to Detroit, said he didn't have finished business. He wanted to finish business in Detroit before he started that next chapter as a head coach. There's no doubt in anybody's mind whether or not Aaron Glenn will become a head coach in the NFL. It's just a matter of when it will happen and who he will be coaching for. Now, Brad Holmes is going into year 2 as a general manager, and for a second offseason in a row, I think aced the offseason. He is not a big spender, not a super aggressive general manager early on, right? Signing a lot of team-friendly deals, signing a lot and kind of starting with a foundation on the trenches. But I think for where the Detroit Lions were at when Brad Holmes arrived, he's done a very good job the last 2 offseasons. He has aced the draft. I think he has finished with a top 5, top 10 draft, easily top 10 draft in both of his draft classes so far. And I think you can make the argument that they've both been top 5 classes when it's all said and done. So Brad Holmes has been a very good, very effective general manager for the Detroit Lions. He is getting the Lions in a good position. He is putting them in the right spot, and he is very much the general manager that the Lions needed after the Quinn Tricia era. Now, getting on to projected starters, these are the guys that will likely take the field in week 1, or with the exception of Jamison Williams, when they are healthy. This would be the peak of Detroit Lions football right here with this starting offense. Of course, you have Taylor Decker starting at left tackle, potential Pro Bowl season incoming for him. He's been a very good, underrated player for a long time in the NFL for the Detroit Lions. Jonah Jackson is coming off a Pro Bowl season, right? First Pro Bowl appearance as an offensive lineman, and could come back as an even better offensive lineman next year. Frank Ragnow, former Pro Bowler, top 5 center in the NFL, potential All-Pro this season. He is coming back from a injury-riddled season where he missed a majority of last year as well. Big V, although didn't get any Pro Bowl praises, did not allow a single sack a season ago. And, of course, Penei Sewell, the prized possession on that offensive line, is returning for year 2 as the Lions' right tackle. This offensive line should finish as a top 5 in the NFL. A lot of people have them even higher as a top 3 line, and some people have them as the best line in football. They can stay healthy. They should give the Lions a very good chance to win games in Detroit. Now, the wide receiver, of course, DJ Chark and Jamison Williams are guys that we have already mentioned, but Amon-Ra St. Brown, a top 5 rookie from a class a season ago with a lot of good rookie wide receivers. He finished with, I believe, the most receptions of any rookie from last season and finished just barely missing out on that 1,000-yard rookie campaign. He will return likely as the number 3 and the slot wide receiver. TJ Hawkinson will return as a tight end, a top 7 to top 5 tight end, depending on who you ask. Jared Goff will return at quarterback, again, a top 20, I'd say 15 on his good days quarterback in the NFL. You have DeAndre Swift, a very young, very talented running back as the Detroit Lions starter, right? Is a good receiving threat, is a good running threat, is kind of a dual threat guy that can do whatever you need him to do. And of course, Jason Kabinda, defaultly, I guess, technically, would be the fullback number 1. Not a whole lot of teams use fullbacks, but Jason Kabinda has been an effective weapon on the Lions offense for quite some time now. Now, getting over the defensive side of the ball, Aiden Hutchinson will likely start as the edge rusher 1 on either side. Aleem McNeil and Levi Onwuzurike will likely man the middle in their 4-3 defense. And then Romeo Okwara is returning from an Achilles injury, should be able to start on the other edge rotation. But again, I think it is important to know that Josh Pascal will be rotating in with either Aleem or Levi or Okwara or even Hutchinson, right? He will be moving around a ton. So it's really a 5-man front, but of course you can only start 4 players at a time. Alex Anzalone, I think, will return as a starter and a captain to the Detroit Lions defense. Derek Barnes, the second-year linebacker, I think will man the middle and I think will be the Lions' best linebacker this season. And then Malcolm Rodriguez, the 6th-round pick, is already kind of getting some buzz about maybe getting the green dot, maybe getting, the communication side of the Lions defense, right? He's been praised a ton by the coaching staff about just his smarts, about his IQ, about his leadership ability. And he is a legitimate candidate to be the leader and the communicator on the Detroit Lions defense as a 6th-round rookie. Going into the secondary, Amani Oruwariye is coming off an all-pro type season. Jeff Okudah going into year 3, year 2 under Aubrey Pleasant and Aaron Glenn. If he can stay healthy, should have a pretty good bounce-back season. A.J. Parker was a free agent a year ago, was an undrafted free agent from Kansas State who ended up playing a lot of starting snaps as the nickel defender and played really well, came away with an interception and a couple big passes defended. And then, of course, Tracy Walker and Deshaun Elliott will both be starting as the starting safeties for Detroit in week 1. But again, kind of talking about depth, Kirby Joseph and even Ifeatu Melifonwu will likely see some time at safety as well. Now, the Detroit Lions, I think a big thing with them is they don't have a ton of star power, right? Nobody on this defense and nobody on this offense is going to be an all-pro, apart from maybe Frank Ragnow, right? But they don't have a ton of people that are top 10 at their position. I'd say they have a top 10 center in the NFL. I'd say they have a top 10 tight end in the NFL. And that's about it. Maybe a top 10 corner in Amani Oruwariye, but there's a lot of good cornerbacks out there. They don't have a ton of superstars, but they have a lot of depth, and they have a lot of very good quality depth in the NFL. And that, I think, is the first step in a rebuild, is to acquire depth. And when you have your depth, that's when you go after your superstars, right? In the secondary, they have their starters, and their starters should be a pretty good young secondary. But the players you don't see on that screen are Jerry Jacobs, Ifeatu Melifonwu, Kirby Joseph, Mike Hughes is up there as well. A lot of players that have seen starting time have started in the NFL and played really, really good snaps, right? Another player in the linebacking core that you don't see is Jarrad Davis, a player that was drafted by the Detroit Lions, a former first-round pick, has some upside, has some potential, probably won't start, but will certainly play a number of packages. And again, like I mentioned, you have Josh Pascal on that defensive line, so it's not just the four, it's really going to be more of a starting five. Back to the offensive side of the football, right? You have Khalif Raymond, you have Quintez Cephas, you have, a couple of guys there. Running back wise, you have Jamal Williams, you have some really good players. Even on the offensive line, if injuries do occur, you have a guy like Evan Brown who played really, really well and is a top 20 center in the NFL, right? The Lions have 2 top 20 centers in the NFL, and one of them will not play a snap, right? Brock Wright was a really good backup tight end last year for the Detroit Lions. So the Lions' strength may not come from their superstars, but more so come from their depth. And if injuries strike again, the Lions are built this season to withstand some injury concerns. They are built to battle through injuries. They are built this season and have the depth to combat the injury bug when it eventually strikes again. Now, getting on to predicted awards, I did offensive player, defensive player, rookies, and the MVP of the team. I do think DeAndre Swift will be the offensive player of the year. If he is healthy, if he is ready to go, he is, I think, the best player on the Lions offense right now. He is explosive in the running game. He is explosive in the pass game. He is a dynamic weapon in both the ground and the air. And if he can stay healthy behind the best offensive line of his career, behind the best supporting cast of his career, right? They can't stack the box. They can't necessarily just hone in on DeAndre Swift like last year because they got to deal with Jamison Williams and DJ Chark and St. Brown, and they have to deal with TJ Hawkinson, right? They have to deal with some legitimate boundary weapons now, so they can't just focus strictly on DeAndre Swift in the running game. I think he's going to have the best season of his career. He's coming off a year with over 1,000 scrimmage yards. I think you might see 1,200 to 1,500 scrimmage yards this season for DeAndre Swift, and I think you could see double-digit touchdowns because the surrounding cast is that good for DeAndre Swift. Now, defensive player of the year, I think there's a couple candidates, right? Romeo Okwara is obviously a big-time player. You obviously have, Tracy Walker, who's a good player. You have Aiden Hutchinson, who could come in and maybe make a case for that player. But I do think Amani Oruwariye will repeat as DPOY. I do think he is a legitimate shutdown cornerback in the NFL. He is somebody that came away with 6 interceptions a season ago, came away with the 3rd lowest quarterback rating when targeted a year ago. He is quietly a shutdown cornerback in the NFL. He might be the least talked about superstar corner in the NFL right now because he was a top 10 corner a season ago. You're not going to find 10 cornerbacks that played better football than Amani Oruwariye last season. And I think he will continue to fly under the radar, but will continue to produce at an extremely high level and will be the best defensive player for the 2nd year in a row on the Lions defense. Now, offensive rookie of the year, there's only 2 options. And Jamison Williams is the obvious pick, right? He's one of 2 offensive players drafted for this team. He may not play until week 6, but like I said when we were talking about the draft class, once he arrives in Detroit, once he gets on the field, he will explode into a massive role. And then kind of similar thing, right? You have more options for defensive player of the year, but there's no way it's not going to be Aiden Hutchinson. Aiden Hutchinson will maybe not dominate the league early, but he will certainly impact the league very, very early. You're talking about a potential double-digit sack season. You're talking about, defensive rookie of the year in the NFL. The obvious pick is Aiden Hutchinson for defensive rookie of the year for the Detroit Lions. And then MVP, although I think DeAndre Swift may be the best offensive player, I do think Jared Goff was the only player that is in the right position to win this. If Jared Goff can play like he finished this season a year ago, if he can play like the player that, finished with 9 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, if he can play like the quarterback that led the Lions to 3 wins over legitimate playoff contenders, he could lead the Lions to a wild card spot. He can lead the Detroit Lions to a very good finish this season in the NFL draft or in the NFL regular season, and he will be the team's MVP. If the Lions have success, Jared Goff will be the engine to that success, right? He has the surrounding cast, he has the line, he has the receivers, he has the running game, he has the support, he has the coaching. This is the time for Jared Goff to return to top-tier quarterback status. This is the time for Jared Goff to return to the top 15, return to the playoffs as a starting quarterback. This is the season for Jared Goff to do that. Do I think Jared Goff is going to get MVP hype? No. Do I think Jared Goff is going to finish as a top 10 quarterback? No. But I think the surrounding cast for Jared Goff is good enough this season for him to be not only the team MVP, but potentially take the Lions to the playoffs. Now, getting on to the NFL schedule, we have quite a bit to talk about. Got to get that drink of water. Now, the Lions have a very interesting schedule. Going into the preseason, they are currently ranked as having the 28th strength of schedule in the NFL. They are in kind of a similar situation to the Bengals a season ago, where they're coming off maybe a down year, but they're extremely young. They're looking to bounce back. They don't have the toughest schedule in the NFL. They got significantly better, and their division got worse, I would say. I think the NFC North definitely got worse this season as an entirety, but I think the Lions are in a good situation this year. I think their ceiling is 9 wins, and I think their floor is 6 wins. When you look at this schedule, right, the Lions play obviously 6 divisional games, which I think at a bare minimum, the Lions will go 2-4 in the division. That's what they went a season ago. Like I said, they got better. The division got worse. If they do not go 2-4 in the division at a bare minimum, I think they are severely underachieving. They went 2-4 last year. They are a better football team now. I think they'll even be closer to 3-3, if not 4-2 in the division. But I think worst case scenario, at a floor, the Lions go 2-4 in the division, which is 2 wins right off the bat. You also look at the fact that they play Washington, they play Seattle, they play New York, Jacksonville, New York again, Carolina. Those games, I think, are all winnable games, and I think those are all games that the Lions fans should expect their team to win. Now, of course, they're not going to win all of them, but of those 6 games, the Lions should win at least 2, if not 3, in a worst-case scenario. If you tell me the Lions go a full season playing Washington, Seattle, New York, Jacksonville, and Carolina, and you're telling me they don't walk away with at least 2 wins in those 6 games, then again, I think they're very much underachieving. They should walk away with 2 to 3 wins at a bare minimum of those 6 games, which if you consider a 2-4 or 3-3 division, as well as a 2-4 or 3-3 6-game stretch with that, that is 6 games. That is 4 to 6 wins at a bare minimum. Then you get on to the good teams. You talk about, the playoff contenders, the Philadelphias, the New Englands, the Dallases, the Miamis, the Buffalo Bills. Those 5 games, the Lions should win at least 1. They will upset 1 good team this season. Every single NFL team wins an upset game, whether they're good or bad, whether they're the best team in the NFL or the worst team in the NFL. Every single year, a good team gets upset by a bad team. And every single year, a bad team upsets a good team. And the Lions are in a situation like that, right? Last year, they upset the Cardinals. They upset the Minnesota Vikings. And I would even say they upset the Green Bay Packers in week 18. But I know people are going to argue that the starters didn't play. That's an argument for a different day. But the Lions will upset one of those 5 teams, if not 2 of those 5 games. So you're not even talking about the Lions having a winning record in any of those 3 stretches. You're still talking about the Lions playing 6 winning games. Right, you're talking 2-4 in the division. You're talking 2-4 on the 9 playoff games and 2-3 in the playoff games. That's 6 wins at a bare minimum. If you're talking about worst case scenarios, you're talking about, somebody gets hurt on the offense. You're talking about Frank Ragnow goes down again. You're talking about, a large majority of the offensive line missing time again. You're talking about DeAndre Swift missing time. You're talking about Okwara getting injured again. And, the depth really being tested on the Lions football team. But at a ceiling, in a year where the Lions are healthy, in a year where the Detroit Lions are, playing their starters and their superstars are making plays, they could in the division them in the division could go 3-3, if not 4-2 in those games, in those 6 games versus the teams that are not expected. They could win 4 games. That's 8 games right there. And again, 1 or 2 upsets, that's 9 wins. And it's not that unrealistic with the schedule that the Detroit Lions have actually been placed with. So with that being said, and with all that being out of the way, that is kind of the deep dive on the Detroit Lions. They are a good football team. They are a team that should contribute and should win a lot of games in the 2022 NFL season. Are they going to win a playoff game? Probably not. Are they going to make the playoffs? Again, I think you could argue yes or no. But the Detroit Lions got better this offseason. They are maybe not a top 10, maybe not a top 15, or even a top 20 team in the NFL. But they are a team that is getting better by the day. They are a team that is getting better by the offseason and getting significantly better by the offseason. And they may not be ready to compete for playoffs, and they're certainly not ready to compete for Super Bowls, but they are ready to compete with anybody in the NFL. They are ready to play 60 minutes of football and compete with any member of the NFL at this point. Right? Even in their biggest games versus Green Bay, even in their biggest games versus Buffalo, the Lions aren't out of it. The Lions are not, chalked up as an L, right? They're not an easy cakewalk anymore. They are a team that are going to give you everything you have for 60 minutes on Sunday, and they are going to win their fair share of games in the NFL. They will double their win record from a season ago. They will compete for a wild card spot, and they are a team that you're going into week 16, week 17. You are going to see the Lions right there in the wild card hunt. Will they make it? That is yet to be seen. They have a lot to prove if they want to make the playoffs as a 7 seed or a wild card. But will they have a chance? They are going to have an opportunity. So all that being said, that is all for you guys today. That is the deep dive on the Detroit Lions. That is everything you need to know about the Detroit Lions, from rosters to drafts to free agencies to coaching staffs to schedules to floors to from floors to ceilings and projected starters. That is the deep dive on the Detroit Lions. That is the deep dive on the Detroit Lions. Training camp kicks off in 10 days. The NFL season is not far behind, and the Lions football is almost back. Well, all of that being said, that is all for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about the Detroit Lions. What do you have them finishing as? What are your opinions of this team? I'd be very curious to you guys think. But with all of that being said, that is all for you guys today. Thank you both so very much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.